Jesus is the hero of the Bible. And Jesus is the hero because the thief we talked about in session 2, well, he was defeated by Jesus. The thief just couldn't trick Jesus. And ultimately, Jesus made a way for us to overcome this thief as well. Session 3 of Live Fully Alive is an invitation to let Jesus, the master of the art of living and the hero of the Bible, become the hero of your life. The Bible says that Jesus, just like Adam and Eve, was born fully alive. He was not lacking. Jesus was also, like Adam and Eve, approached by Satan. But, unlike Adam and Eve, he was able to overcome. The thief came at Jesus at the very beginning of his ministry and tried to steal that life from him. And you can read that story in Matthew 4, but let me set the scene for you. Jesus was at the end of a 40-day fast in the middle of the desert. He went without food, went without people, went without all these things. And at the very end of it, Satan came to try to take this away. But the temptation did not work. Jesus resisted the cisterns that Satan offered, and he drank only on what God provided. Now it's ironic, isn't it, that Satan stole from Adam and Eve in the middle of a garden filled with everything they could possibly need, but he failed to turn a parched and starving Jesus in the middle of the desert? How was Jesus able to resist the thief's temptation? Jesus, our hero, the reason he could do it is because he was on a mission. He came to bring fully alive back to you, and nothing was going to stop our hero. Jesus' consistency with selfless intimacy and selfless influence throughout the entirety of his ministry is awe-inspiring. Jesus demonstrated his intimacy through his consistent service to all kinds of people. He showed compassion for the broken. He spent long days teaching and healing masses of people that needed leadership. He was patient with his fumbling disciples. Jesus was fully alive with intimacy. Jesus also demonstrated his incomparable influence as well. He calmed a raging storm with his words. He fed 5,000 people with one boy's lunch, and he raised a man named Lazarus from the dead. Jesus also turned water into wine, drove evil spirits out of people, and walked on water. And he did all of these and many other miraculous things, but never once used that influence for his own gain. Jesus used his influence to serve other people. Jesus was fully alive with influence. Jesus' ultimate demonstration of intimacy and influence, however, took place at his death. Jesus, our selfless hero, died a torturous death as he hung, nailed to a cross. He was vulnerable, he was naked, he was exposed, he was dying, he was in pain. And somehow his primary concern was to show love to us, to those there at the scene who were killing him. One of the last things that Jesus said as he was dying was, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." That is pure intimacy. But Jesus was also consistent with his influence on that cross. One of the onlookers ridiculed Jesus that day by saying, "If you truly are the Son of God, save yourself and come down from that cross." And somehow Jesus didn't take offense. He did not use his influence to save himself or to scorn the person that was scorning him. Jesus let them kill him because he knew something that they did not yet know. Jesus knew that his greatest act of influence would come after his death. It would be his resurrection that would change everything. The Bible says that Jesus' resurrection was the knockout punch for the thief. Jesus was the first to live fully alive, and death could not keep him down. And now, anyone who follows Jesus receives his power and guidance to live fully alive as well. Jesus' selfless influence continues today through us, his people. Now, before wrapping up this session, I want to ensure you're able to see just how pertinent this is to you. By choosing that cross over saving himself, Jesus was choosing you. I believe that somehow he could see your face. He could see your life. He knew the cisterns that would trip you up, and he couldn't bear to see you settling for those cisterns. He was willing to suffer, and suffer like few have suffered before, so that you could have this life. If you know the story, you know the thought of facing the cross tortured Jesus. He begged God 3 times while he was in the Garden of Gethsemane to find another way to help us live fully alive. You can feel the agony in Jesus' soul when he told his disciples, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death." And when he went into the garden, he was praying, like I said, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me." Now this is anguish. This is anguish. He did not want to go to that cross, but he did for us. In the book of Luke, it goes even further. It says that Jesus was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like drops of blood. And every time I read this passage, I wonder, how did he do it? How did he go forward with it? His disciples kept falling asleep. He could have just left. He could have escaped. He could have avoided the whole thing. But as tortured as he was by the idea of facing the cross, he stood up. He stood up and he did it for you. He stood up and he did it for me. Jesus came to show you that he loves you. Jesus came to show you that he values you. He came to settle those haunting questions in your soul for good. You're lovable because you're loved by Jesus. You're valuable because Jesus values you enough to put your life ahead of his own. And that, my friends, is the gospel. That is the good news that Jesus brought from heaven. Jesus came for you to live fully alive. And as we'll learn in the next session, death is never the end for those who are fully alive. Jesus was raised from the dead on the other side of that cross, and his resurrection blazed a path for us to move from death to life ourselves. How does this happen? We'll cover that in session 4. Enjoy the reflection questions and the Bible engagement, and I will see you there.